Hey everybody, it's about 11:15 or so, and I was having a discussion on Instagram with Nuts and Bolts that he says he's got an early Merkel. And he tags me and he says, "That's a Thor." And he shows me an ad, and it's the same bike with Merkel light at the bottom. So what we're going to talk about today, and I'm really loath to make videos when I don't have a motorcycle and literature in front of me to talk about. But Flying Merkel is dear and near to my heart. I've always wanted original paint. I've never had the money when one come up. But I did have a 1910 twin, and I did have a lot of literature over the years, and I know a little bit about them. So I'm going by memory here. And I might be a little off on my years and my exact, because I'm going by memory. I really like to have the actual documentation in front of me. So we're going to give you a brief overview of the Flying Merkel as I recall it. So Mr. Merkel started his company, if I recall correctly, in 1904. Actual producing motorcycle in 1904. Somewhere between 04 and 05, he was advertising, again if I recall correctly, not just a single, but a twin and a 3-cylinder of his own design. Boop, boop, and one sticking in the front. I have no proof that either this early twin or this 3-cylinder were ever produced. Just because you saw an ad in a magazine doesn't mean he actually made it. But he was making his own bikes and his own motors, but he was struggling financially. So he merged with a company called Light in 1907. Now, Light was not a manufacturer, but he had money. What he was doing is he was buying his motorcycles from Thor. Now what Thor was a motor and a motorcycle that was put together by Aurora Automatic Machine Company. Now, who they were a machine and foundry works, quite successful, that contracted with Indian. Remember Indian, starting in 1901, that was their prototype? Well, they didn't have a foundry to actually machine up their motor design, but Aurora did. Aurora says, okay, yeah, we'll give you a discount, but we want to use your proprietary design for our own machine. And then he says, yeah, okay, sounds good to us. Well, it's really important to understand, just like in the chopper days, like in 2000, you can buy an S&S motor, all of a sudden you got an Indian. You can buy an S&S motor, all of a sudden you got a Titan. You got a Big Dog, you got a Daddy Mac, you got a whatever bike, because they built zillions of parts from over these guys and those guys and those guys with an S&S motor, and all of a sudden they built a bike. Well, the same thing was going on in the early days of motorcycle manufacturing in this country. The first one that got in on it, thanks to Aurora, was the Thor motor. So people would buy a proprietary Thor motor. Later on they would buy a Spacky motor, which was developed as a twin starting about 1910, and they developed their own machine around this motor. They'd buy a fork from here and a tank from there and a fender from there, and they'd assemble it. So even the big companies, a lot of them bought their fenders from somewhere else. And they just kind of re-altered it or had it altered to their design and then bolted it together instead of having the entire press works to press a brand new fender and a brand new this and a brand new there. They bought Eclipse clutches. They bought the pedal cranks, you follow? And they built a machine around this. One of the very few marks that actually was a small company that made their entire design was Fieldbach Limited, which I posted on Instagram. I had 2 at one time. There was 5 known when I had the 2. And the 5th one I found had been forgotten about in the 60s. Everybody forgot that it was around. Everybody thought there was 4. And they actually made their entire bike, and their smokestack was just outside of Walter Davidson's window. You can see it. Boom, Fieldbach right in your face. Bam, here we are. And it was a complete, utter proprietary design, designed in-house and machined in-house. They made 300 of them. That's it. Fieldbach Limited. So let's get back to Flying Merkel. So Merkel and Light, they combined. Now it's the Merkel Light, but they still got all these stores that Light was buying. Light was not a manufacturer. They are a resupplier and stuck their name on it. Now, I've never heard tell of anybody actually finding a Light motorcycle in original paint. So I don't know personally whether they actually made a Light with a Light decal, because all the advertisements I've seen looks just like an early Thor, and you can't see what decals on it. It's just like kind of blurry ad. Ooh, we're going to sell it. So whether they renamed it and stuck their decal on it, or it said Thor, or it was blank. A lot of that stuff was going on back then. all kinds of companies. One was called a pirate. They pirated everything. Looks just like a Yale. They didn't make any of it. So it was really common. Hundreds of companies were doing this. And you could buy this and buy that and stick it together and stick your name on it. Eagle was another company like that. They made an Eagle. Used a Spacky motor, made some of this, made some of that from those guys and bolted it together. Sears and Roebuck, the store, well, they had a giant catalog at the time. You could buy anything, including a motorcycle. It said Sears on the tank, but Sears was a big company. And they built it out of parts from everywhere else, including a Spacky motor, and stuck their name on the tank. Painted it red and white. Beautiful bike. But they did not manufacture a bit of it. They probably didn't even assemble it. They bought it from someone over there, said assemble it, and stuck their name on the tank, painted it to order, boom, we sell it. This was very, very common. So Merkel and Light combined in '07. But Merkel has a manufacturing facility, Light's got money. They combine. Now they're actually making Merkel lights, singles. By '09, late '09, he comes up with an actual twin, a real twin. Goes into real production by 10. There's a few '09 twins out there, for sure. Don't quote me on an '08 or not. Don't know, not for a fact. But I've seen a couple '09 twins. I had a 10 twin. Each one was a little different. They sell out to Miami. Miami was another company. Miami motorcycle manufacturer. They buy Merkel Light, and it becomes the Flying Merkel. It was already called the Flying Merkel by mid-1910. Early 10s were still Merkel Light, but mid-1910 they refinanced, got money in, and they were so successful on the racetrack, somebody called them, man, there goes one of them Flying Merkels. Wow, good name. They renamed it. Mid-10. Miami buys them by 11. Mr. Merkel goes with them as engineer. Now Miami's got more money. They refinance again. They moved to Pottstown, Pennsylvania. And I can't remember the earlier towns they were in right now. I'm doing all this off memory. So they moved to Pottstown, Pennsylvania in 11. Now at this time, they're using ball bearings from Germany for their lower end. Things are beautiful, except in 1914 we had this little problem called World War I. And we went at it so far, by 16, they couldn't get their ball bearings anymore. There wasn't any Americans who could make them to the same quality that they used. And Henry Ford's Model T came out in 14, and the motorcycle market went in the toilet, and they died. 16 was the last year. But it was a very innovative mark. They had a monoshock in the back, the later ones. They had a step starter on some of the later ones where you step it forward and a self-winding spring would actually start the bike. A lot of innovation in the Flying Merkel. The Flying Merkel fork was so true, a lot of the racers would grab a Merkel fork and put them on their racer and ride the racetrack. So we're going to show you some original paint pictures I took many, many years ago. I think it was out of the Herb Glass collection. What's really unique about this bike is I went to see the collection because I knew about it, and Bud had sold all these early bikes for $4,500 a pop. Not $5 grand, $4,500 a pop. He sold 10 of them for $45,000. I'm like, you got any left? Can I buy one? All he had left was a Cleveland single. Oh, all these really cool early. He's like, what do you want with a wall hanger? But they're so cool, but you can't ride them, but they're so cool. Ah, fuck. So that was a different part of my life, a different tangent. And I got really into it for a while. And we're going to show you some pictures of a 1909 original paint Merkel Light. Again, they weren't called the Flying Merkel to sometime early in mid 10, and it started showing up on the tank. Mine was a mid 10 restored Flying Merkel. It was restored by Mike Smith when he was still alive for Jim Lattin, who is still alive. And you see the striping details. Now I'm going to scan this for nuts and bolts. I don't know his real name. And Pete Young, who goes by, if I pronounce it correctly, Oshalungo on Instagram, because he's got some friend of his restoring them. This is a 9. The striping in 10 was different. And I used to have literature and magazines and all that back in the day. When I got my little problem, I had to sell all that stuff. Look at the striping on the frame. Isn't that cool? All kinds of striping on this bike. Here's a better shot of the tank decal. Again, this is a 9, his original paint. And this is one of Bud Eakins' bikes. It came from California. It's actually a California bike. So I saw that, and then I just, can I get pictures? I was just in love with this motorcycle. I knew exactly where it came from. Bud's telling me the story. I'm there a week too late. Still the original plate on it. Look at the striping and decal on that fender. Look at the striping on the top of that frame rail there. Isn't that cool? It's all factory striping. These are the only pictures that survived. I probably had more. I lost most of my photos over the years. So anyhow, by memory, without any documentation that I currently have, that is the story of the Flying Merkel. So I thought it was important because of the discussion. I really suggest any of you guys follow me hunting Harleys on Instagram. There's a lot of stuff that I post that is not really worth a video. But because I did have those pictures, I'm going to scan them for the boys, and because of the importance of the mark, I'm going to go ahead and make this video and post it. Now real quick, I'm going to step back in front of the camera as the last little adjunct. The Flying Merkel, starting in 09, they were racing the Merkel, and they were very fast. That's why it became the Flying Merkel. By 1912, I think it was, Baldwin Jones took what was originally a Waverly top end, which became Jefferson, which became PEM, which became a Mac. Whole different finance problems. What it was an overhead valve twin, rocking motor, screaming fast, but everything was spindly light, and they just didn't survive. I had an original paint tank years ago that I bought from Mike Wolf from American Pickers. Well, he wasn't an American picker back then. He was just a guy that lived in Iowa. And I met him at Davenport. This is 1996, and he had this Jefferson tank on the table. Like, you want to sell that? Everybody's been asking. And I sat down and talked to him. I quizzed him real heavy. He's like, where'd it come from? How'd you get it? Was there anything else in the garage? Like, oh, that's important. I said, yeah, that's important. Hey, that was a bike there. Where did it go? And I still don't know of any other original paint Jefferson tank that's ever showed up. And he says, well, I want to offer you $700 for it, which was a lot of money back then, you have to understand. And the next day, it's like, man, I got to go press him on that tank. And he's walking across the swap meet to me, bring me the tank, because everybody else is kicking him in the nuts trying to get it from him for $150, $200. Says, the only dude that even, sees any value in this thing, I want you to have it. It's like, oh, thank you, thank you. I had my first limited there. It's like, oh, I had it on my mantle for many years. When I got my big problem, all that stuff went away. But the important thing I'm bringing up right now is Baldwin Jones, a very famous racer, took a Jefferson top end and cut it off. He was working at the Flying Merkel plant, at the Miami plant that became Flying Merkel. He's working there. He was one of their mechanics assembling bikes, and he would race on the weekends himself. And he had authorization to go ahead and hop one up. So he took this Jefferson top end. At the first time he built one, it was a Waverly, like I said. Later on, he redid it, and now it's a Jefferson. Took a Jefferson top end and put it on his single, and he just killed everybody on those tracks. So he just wiped them out. Wiped them out. Super, super fast. Very famous racer. Look him up, Baldwin Jones. So anyhow, 16 comes around, no more ball bearings. The war in Europe's raging. They're having a problem, and they close the doors. No more Flying Merkels. That's the last year. But for a very brief window in time, they were comparatively a very large manufacturer in comparison with most of the smaller guys, and they were in the thick of it. They were on the track with Harley. They were on the track with Indian. They were very competitive. See you guys in the next video.